As promised for the 4th of July, I am focusing on the American Revolution. These are longer form videos, so I had to wait till I had time. I got time today. Are you guys ready? This is America's Hercules, Peter the Giant, Francisco. This is the Fat Electrician. Lock in, you guys. Gonna be a long one. Let's go. Let's go. Turned up? Yeah, let's go.
Quote, without him, we would have lost two crucial battles, perhaps the war, and with it, our freedom. George Washington. And the fact that you probably have no idea who I'm talking about is a tragedy that we're gonna fix right now.
Yay.
Today we're talking about Peter Francisco, aka the Virginia Giant, also known as the Virginian Hercules or the Giant of the American Revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, I've wanted to make this video for years and I've worked on and off on it for years, but the problem is everything about this man online reads like an urban legend or a myth, and I don't make videos on urban legends, I make videos on things that actually happened. The urban legend is essentially this: a 5-year-old boy washes up on the shore in Virginia, he doesn't speak English, he speaks Portuguese, he winds up becoming a blacksmith's apprentice where he grows to a staggering size of 6'6", 280 pounds.
Damn.
Now, obviously, that's a large man by today's standards, but it's not like freakishly insanely big by today's standards. But you gotta remember, this is the mid 1700s. The average man is only 5'5". George Washington in this era is renowned as being a giant man. He's only 6'2", 190 pounds. This guy is 4 inches larger and 100 pounds heavier. And he has what can only be described as superhuman strength, because despite his massive size, which would imply that he's very strong, he was somehow able to lift an 1,100-pound cannon barrel onto his shoulder and carry it off the battlefield so it didn't fall into the hands of the British at the Battle of Camden. Then, according to legend, after hearing about this and seeing him on the battlefield on other occasions, George Washington himself commissioned the creation of somewhere between a 5-foot and 6-foot long broadsword for Peter Francisco that was so large and so heavy, the average man of that time couldn't even unsheath it.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Francisco then proceeded to carry that sword into battle at Guilford's courthouse and cut 11 British soldiers in half. And somewhere along the way, he once also got into a bar fight by himself against 11 British dragoons, beat all of them, and then stole their horses. And that is the legend of Peter Francisco, but I now believe that I have the full story, and to be completely intellectually honest with you, I cannot prove beyond the shadow of a doubt with hard evidence and primary sources that this is exactly how everything went down. But this is the best guess, and we're going to get to it right after a word from our sponsor.
I'm going to let the sponsor play, but I just want to put out in the universe that I respect the fact that he's like, look, I got it as close to factually accurate as I possibly can. But sometimes, especially with older, stories and stuff, not everything was documented. And some things, ended up becoming tall tales. It just happens. But I respect the fact that he's admitting to that and he's making it very, very clear. That way somebody's like, that's not what happened. You can be like, I said I got it as factually accurate as possible. I get it. Ignore me messing with my hair. I went to the gym this morning and then I took a shower because, as one does. And so now it's trying to dry and the fan's blowing and it's driving me absolutely crazy. Yeah, I know, right? Such terrible, terrible problems. Terrible problems I'm dealing with. I'm here for this, you guys. Let's go. What sponsor is it today? Let's find out.
What are you doing?
Look what the Easter
He's so
Bunny
cute.
got me.
Oh, he got you a Ninja Turtle?
Yeah.
You know what the Easter Bunny's tax rate is?
No.
It's 0.
0.
Yeah.
He's like, what?
Good job. All right, you guys know the deal. Delete Me, online subscription model. You give them money every month. They turn around and make sure that data brokers on the internet aren't selling your personal information. What does this actually do in practice? It gets rid of your personal info, isn't just floating around the internet for anybody to be able to buy.
I did last time that he had this commercial. I actually did mention that I know people that use Delete Me. Now, somebody was trying to say, oh, it's so-and-so. I'm not saying who. I know a lot of artists and a lot of YouTubers, and I know more than one that use this service and love it. So for the record, I will neither confirm nor deny anyone. If I know them and I know they use it, I will never confirm or deny that because it's none ya. Okay? Okay.
pie for a couple of bucks. Can I know what you're thinking? Because I thought the same thing. I don't want to give delete me all my personal information either. I'm trying to get my personal information off the internet. Why would I give it to an internet company? You don't really have to give them your personal information. It's honestly kind of creepy. I gave them my name and my email address, and that was it. They came back to me a couple of days later and was like, is this your address or one of your previous addresses? It was. Is this your mom's full name? Uh-huh. Is that your dad's full name? Uh-huh. Are you related to this person? Did you go to this high school? They knew everything about me and knew exactly who I was just by me giving them my name and my email. All I had to do was answer a couple of yes or no questions as to whether or not that was in fact me, which it was, at which point they're like, cool, go ahead, pay for our subscription service. We'll go to all the data brokers where we found this information and force them to delete it. And as long as you keep being a paying member, they will continue to monitor all these data brokers for your personal information. And if these data brokers do acquire it again, they will force them to delete it again. In my opinion, it's definitely worth it. I've been using them since before they were paying me to talk about them, and I'm going to keep using them after they quit paying me to talk about them. If you want to give it a try, I'll have a link and a discount code down below. Let's get back to the video.
Oh, here we go.
Our story begins in 1765 at the docks of City Point, Virginia. One of the men working the docks this day is a guy by the name of James Durrell. There's a big ship anchored out there, and then he sees that the whaling boat is getting rowed closer and closer to the dock, so he goes out to the dock to meet these people to see what they want. As they get closer and closer, he can start to see, okay, there's some grown men, and then what appears to be a child on board. They get closer and closer. Eventually, they pull up to the dock, don't tie off or anything, just hand him a 5-year-old boy, and then row away. So James is like, what the fuck? And those guys just keep rowing. So he looks down at this 5-year-old kid. The kid is in very, very nice clothes. He's got silver buckles on his shoes that are the letters P and H. Like, it's very apparent that whatever family this kid comes from, that family has money. So he looks at this 5-year-old little rich kid and is like, what is going on? Who are you? And the kid just like looks at him blankly. And then he comes to realize, okay, this kid, he doesn't speak English. So he resorts to the timeless classic. My name is James. James, what's your name? And the kid looks at him and says, Pedro Francisco. All right, Pedro Francisco, the P and H boot buckles are starting to make a little bit more sense now. We don't call people Pedro here. This is America. Your name's Peter now.
Hello, Peter.
From here, not really knowing what to do, maybe somebody's coming to pick this kid up later, so he takes him up to the wharf, gets the kid fed. The whole day passes, nobody comes to get this kid. So they get him a bed, he stays the night, and he ends up living there for weeks, and nobody's coming to get this kid. Nobody knows who he is. From here, they start theorizing.
Out of curiosity, before he starts his theories, the first thing that popped in my head was if he was well off, dressed well, and all of that, is there a chance that he was like a bastard child? Because to be honest, back then, you know, they didn't want to always claim them because they might love them and care for them and all that, but they didn't want to claim them because it made them look bad, right? I don't know. That's just a weird theory. Let's see what he says.
They figure out, you know, this kid speaks Portuguese. Maybe he was kidnapped by those guys and then they decided to back out and dropped him off. Or maybe they were trying to hold him for ransom and they weren't going to pay the ransom and didn't know what to do with the kid. Or maybe he was taken on as a captain's apprentice and the captain took the money to take him on as an apprentice, but didn't actually want to train him. So he just dropped him off at a dock somewhere. We have no idea. And nobody would know for sure who this kid was or where he came from until like the 1970s. In 1971, a doctor would go to Terceira Island in the Azores island chain off of Portugal, and there he would set about figuring out who Peter or Pedro Francisco actually was. And he found that there was a Pedro Francisco born on the island in 1760 to a fairly wealthy family, and that wealthy family had a bunch of documentation on the island. They had birth certificates, death certificates for the mother, the father, the siblings, but for Pedro Francisco, there was only a birth certificate, no death certificate, no other documentation proving that he lived on that island other than that, which strongly suggests that he was kidnapped. But nobody's gonna figure that out for 200 years, and there's this kid living inside the wharf, and eventually the local authorities come by and they're like, look, this kid can't live here forever. We're gonna have to take him and put him into an orphanage. And the workers at the wharf, they've come to like this kid. He's starting to learn English. He's a nice kid. He can stay here with us. You don't have to ship him off to an orphanage. And the local authorities are like, absolutely not. We're not gonna let a bunch of dock workers raise a kid. No. So the workers want to make sure he goes to a good home, call up somebody they know, this wealthy guy in town, a guy by the name of Judge Anthony Winston, who lives on this massive plantation right outside of town. He comes by, visits the kid, he likes the kid, he agrees that he'll take the kid in. The judge tells the local authorities, I'm gonna handle it. It's 1764. Judge says he's gonna take care of it. Okay, the matter is settled. He goes to live in Hunting Tower with Judge Anthony Winston. From here, we don't know a ton about his childhood. We know that he was never an indentured servant, but we also know that he was never never formally adopted. The best guess is that the judge loved him, thought of him as a son, raised him that way, but the judge's wife didn't really care for him and she wouldn't allow him to formally adopt him. So basically, Peter grows up on this plantation getting treated like Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. He's the bastard child that's still, you know, the son of the king. He pretty much immediately starts growing like a weed. Allegedly, he's the size of a full-grown man by the time he's like 8 years old. And
Damn.
obviously, he outgrows the shoes that he showed up at the dock with. And remember, those shoes had those very ornate P and H shoe buckles on them. And the judge didn't want those to get, you know, thrown out or him to lose them because it's the only thing he has that he showed up to America with. So the judge, as a gift to him, has them recrafted from shoe buckles into knee buckles that would go on his pants that he would wear for the rest of his life. We also know that obviously this was the 1700s. He's clearly going to end up working on this plantation, and the thing that he gravitated toward at a young age was blacksmithing, and then he would actually go out and shoe the horses. By the time he was 10, he was almost 6 feet tall, and it was said that when a horse didn't want to get shoed, he could physically hold the horse's leg and shoe it at the same time while it was resisting. We also know that he didn't really get any formal education because he wasn't able to read or write till much later in life. However, he was exceptionally intelligent because he was always hanging out with his new dad, Judge Winston, and all of his buddies. And one of those buddies that came to visit frequently was a lawyer by the name of Patrick Henry that would go on to become Peter Francisco's mentor. If you don't know, Patrick Henry is one of the biggest voices early on in the American Revolution, and Peter Francisco would follow him around from town to town while he delivered speeches, basically stoking the flames of what would become the American Revolution. And this comes to a head on March.
Okay, so I'm just going to say something. This is just a random opinion, as I do. As we do, as one does. Because things pop up in my head all the time while I'm listening and watching and questions and curiosities. I just have one thing to say. I don't think intelligent... Okay. If you're not intelligent, you're not intelligent. Like, if you're just kind of, slow, okay? If you're slow, then you're slow. It doesn't matter how much information you put in front of somebody, they just might not have the capability to process or absorb it. Their brain doesn't function that way. They don't think that way. However, if you have the potential for intelligence and, high level processing of information and comprehension, right? Not putting them in front of information and, thrive. What's the word? Encouraging them to learn and to explore new things and have, different perspectives and really, learn can stunt their intelligence. They are intelligent. They just have never had the capability to use it, flex that muscle, right? However, if you put all that information and encouragement in front of them, then they can really thrive. However, there's a reason they say you can't fix stupid. Some people are just dumb. Hey, I ain't mad at them. It takes all kinds. But some people so I don't think necessarily that being surrounded by intelligent people necessarily made him intelligent. He must have had he had a big brain in that big body. 6 foot by like 10. So my daughter is 12 and she's almost taller than me, which is wild. And I don't like it. So, and she's 12. So, I can't imagine like
30th, 1775, when of what would become the American Revolution. And this comes to a head on March 30th, 1775, when Peter Francisco is 15 years old at St. John's Episcopal Church in Richmond, Virginia, when Patrick Henry delivers one of the most famous lines in American history, "Give me liberty or give me death." And Peter Francisco is sitting right there when it happens. And this is a tipping point for Peter Francisco. He's been following around Patrick Henry for years at this point, listening to these speeches. He's already got this huge amount of patriotism and understanding for his age, and then he hears those words, "Give me liberty or give me death." As soon as he gets back home to Judge Winston, he goes to him and asks his permission to join the United States military. And Judge Winston has, the proud dad moment of, I'm really proud I helped raise a man that wants to do this, but also, you're 15 years old. I understand that right now you're 6'5", 250 pounds, and I'm looking up at you while I say this, but you're not old enough. We need to give it a little bit more time. And Peter actually ends up respecting his father's wishes, and he waits until he has permission, which would come about a year later on October 10th, 1776, when he would enlist in the 10th Virginia Regiment.
For the record, I just want to say something that I think it's absolutely tragic that people are shamed for being a part of the military or for wanting to serve their country. if you're watching this, I guarantee you, you're not that person, right? You're not that person that's like, ew, bleh, military, bleh, what a horrible person. However, there's a lot of people like that out there because they have the freedom to talk shit on the people who gained them that freedom. I think it's really, it's interesting because you know how they have that circular argument, like hard times create good men create good times create what the you know what I'm talking about. Basically, where every time that we have it good, we fight for, you know, we have it bad, we fight for it. We have it good, we screw it up, and then we have to fight for it again because it's too easy, you know? So all these people with squawking their big old mouths, shitting on our country and shitting on the military, you live in the most free society out there in the world. You can say whatever you want with no consequences, even though sometimes I'd like to like consequence the shit out of people for opening their mouths like idiots. Anyway, respect to the military. Back then it was their parents were proud. They were proud of their you know, son going in the military and serving their country. That was honorable. Nowadays people just talk shit. It pisses me off. I don't like that. I don't like that.
Later on October 10th, 1776, when he would enlist in the 10th Virginia Regiment. So the 10th Virginia Regiment, a lot like many other American military units at this point in time, early on in the Revolutionary War, it's just a ragtag group of whoever. You've got everything from 16, 17-year-old kids that are showing up, don't even know how to use a musket, and you've got crazy mountain men coming from the wild frontier that have been fighting Native Americans, wearing buckskins, carrying mountain rifles and tomahawks. So obviously, Peter kind of sticks out. He's like 15, 16 years old. He's a foot taller than everybody else. He's 100 pounds bigger, and he can't really shoot a musket to save his life. Because of that, he gets singled out. A lot of the guys are giving him a hard time, and then one day that all changes when this wild frontiersman wearing a buckskin with the rifle and the tomahawk, just like I said, his name's John Allen, starts giving Peter Francisco shit about how bad he is at shooting this musket, and he's ripping into him, and he's like, you can't hit a cow at 60 yards, and I can hit a squirrel at 200 yards. In fact, I could probably hit a target better with my tomahawk than you can with your musket. Go ahead, Peter. Why don't you go ahead, point to something, I'll hit it with my tomahawk. I'll show you. So Peter, being the smart kid, he sets him up. He looks down and he goes, okay, you see that pine tree? Okay, look like 10, 15 feet up. You see that patch right there where the branches split? Hit that. John Allen jumps up, throws his tomahawk, and splits this thing right down the middle. John Allen whips around as arrogant as ever, like, see, told you I could do that shit. And Peter Francisco just says in front of all the other boys, yeah, that was pretty impressive. How you gonna get it down?
Gotcha, bitch.
Everybody starts laughing their ass off like the kid just set you up. You just lost your tomahawk. Absolutely hilarious. John Allen gets fucking pissed. Peter Francisco, big sweetheart, big teddy bear, actually starts to feel bad for the guy. So he walks over to the tree, looks over at John Allen. He squats down and puts his hand like this and says, John, come here, sit on my hand. And John Allen's like, I'm not doing that. I'm a 170-pound man. I'm not gonna let you pick me up into this tree so I can get my tomahawk down. And Peter Francisco, using his gigantic booming voice, just goes, sit! Peter then proceeds to single-handedly lift a grown-ass man by his ass into the tree so he can receive his tomahawk and sets him back down, which coincidentally was the last time anybody gave Peter shit. Also, him and John Allen became really good friends. Now from here, they get sent off to their first battle at the Battle of Brandywine. Basically, what's going on at the war at this point in time is the British General Howe has decided he's going to take a massive British force, march south from New York to Philadelphia, the home of the Revolution, and just crush the Revolution right now, right out of the gate. George Washington needs to get there, get past Philadelphia, intercept him to save it so the revolution can live on. So obviously, in order to do that, he's going to have to march all of his men either past or through Philadelphia, and he opts to go through Philadelphia and stage a parade because you got to remember, there's still people that are loyal to the crown, there's people that are loyal to the revolution, and he thinks showing people, here's how many young men are willing to go off and fight for this, you should believe in them, and maybe we can actually win this war. So on August 24th, 1777, 10,000 American patriots marched through Philadelphia on their way to Brandywine Creek to stop the British, Peter Francisco included. Obviously, Peter sticks out marching through this parade, being like 18 inches taller than everybody else. Fast forward a couple of weeks, Peter's going to see his first taste of battle on September 11th, 1777 at the Battle of Brandywine. Washington's army is set up, blocking all the easy crossing points along the Brandywine River. Washington's plan here is to basically force all the British people under General Howe's command to have to march through these narrow channels to cross the river, and his army is going to light them up in this fatal funnel and win the battle. It's a solid plan. What Washington doesn't know is that a bunch of Tories, people that are still loyal to the British, have went around and then informed the British of the crossing points that aren't guarded or are very lightly guarded, and the British have exploited that to move a massive force into Washington's flank, and he doesn't know they're there. So when the battle kicks off, the Americans get flanked from where they're not expecting it by a massive force, and the American line starts to disintegrate. Very quickly, this situation goes from we're here to stop the British to we need to get the fuck out of here, otherwise we're all going to get captured and or killed, and the American Revolution is over before it's even really begun. So George Washington and Marquis de Lafayette jump into action. They start.
Before he goes any further, just if you really think about it, and listening to something like this kind of puts it into perspective and nails it down a little bit. One of these things goes differently, we wouldn't be here. That flag wouldn't look like that. We wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. If one thing changed, if one battle went differently, if one person involved in all of this wasn't there, could it potentially have still sussed out in a good way? Maybe. It's just mind-boggling to know that everything fell into place the way that it fell into place and became a part of history. And one thing changing could have ended the war. The British could be, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of mind-boggling. Just a little bit. And it's something to respect. Especially at this point, they went through hell. Like, they were walking. They weren't driving. They weren't flying. They were walking everywhere they went across the country, back, forth, up, down, sideways. They had to get somewhere. You better run. Like, literally, with all of your gear, you better run. Anyway, I'm just saying. Absolute respect.
Revolution is over before it's even really begun. So George Washington and Marquis de Lafayette jump into action. They start organizing the retreat, and Nathaniel Greene, aka the Fighting Quaker, takes the men under his command, the men from Virginia, including Peter Francisco, and forms a new line to cover their retreat. So Peter Francisco and his guys get the order. They run out of this wood line into this open plowed field. They're going to set up a new line and cover the retreat of Washington and Marquis de Lafayette's men, and Peter elects to bring some of the wood line with him. According to the story, he picks up what is described as a medium-sized tree and carries it into the plowed field with him and lays it long ways so him and a bunch of other guys can use it for cover. So Peter and his buddies are posted up behind this tree, waiting for the order to fire. They get the order. They launch several volleys into the British line as they're approaching, and then they get the order to prepare for the bayonets. They're about to bayonet charge the British. Peter Francisco, oh shit moment, looks over to his right. There's his buddy John Allen. He can't mount a bayonet to his mountain rifle, so he pulls out his tomahawk. Peter Francisco looks to his left. There's his other buddy, Adams. They all stand up and get ready to hop over this tree and make the charge, and Adams takes a round directly to the chest and falls over dead. Peter, 17-year-old kind-hearted gentle giant, seeing his friend killed a foot to his left, loses his shit, hops the tree, and charges the British before the order's even given, and all the rest of the 10th Virginia follows. And Peter isn't even effectively using his bayonet, you know, like a spear. He's literally out there swinging a 6-foot-tall rifle and bayonet like it is a baseball bat, knocking British in half, and it's described as cutting men down as if it were a scythe.
He ran his sword through that man as though he were nothing.
Someone dies every time he swings his sword.
This goes on for a little bit, and then eventually the British just kind of evaporate. The rest of the unit that they were engaging falls back to the other end of this field, and the men under Nathaniel Greene's command continue engaging the British in this shootout where they hold off long enough for the rest of the army to retreat, and it finally ends at nightfall. The American army retreats back to Chester, which is on the Delaware River. The battle did not go how they wanted, but the Revolution survived to fight another day. Cutting back to Peter Francisco, after the British that he's engaging in hand-to-hand combat are all either dead or retreated, John Allen.
So just for perspective, opinion, okay? If his friend, yes, it's sad his friend died, but if his friend didn't die, would he have charged like that? If he didn't charge like that, would they have followed? Would they have won that battle? We got a long way to go, y'all.
The British that he's engaging in hand-to-hand combat are all either dead or retreated. John Allen, who also survived, points out like, hey, Peter, you're bleeding from your leg. He looks down, he's got blood all over his leg. He's like, huh. He then proceeds to go to the field hospital. It is there that he finds out that he has been shot in the leg by a musket, and he is, by sheer coincidence or fate, sat down in an aid tent right next to another man who was famously shot in the leg at the Battle of Brandywine, Marquis de Lafayette. Marquis de Lafayette immediately recognizes him as like, oh, you must be the only giant fucking dude moving trees on the battlefield. That was impressive as shit. He then instructs the doctor that is helping him, and only him, to help Peter Francisco as well. Which raises a question for some of you. Why does this Marquis de Lafayette guy have his own personal doctor? Well,
That's a thing, by the way. Important people. It's just think of it. Okay, and I'm not saying the Marquis is anything like the president or something. But the president is going to have a dedicated physician. Officers, big names are going to have their own physician because they need to get them to survive. A lot of people have like, okay, you don't come at me. Like they have knowledge. For example, if you're one of those people that is like a pivotal person in some type of war, they need to protect you because of the information that you have, the correspondence, it's a high value. It's just that simple. It's my opinion. I hear you. What are you doing? Stop it. Guess who's messing with stuff? Stop it. Sorry.
Which raises a question for some of you. Why does this Marquis de Lafayette guy have his own personal doctor? Well, because he's kind of fucking important. You see, Marquis de Lafayette isn't his name, it's actually his title. His real name is Gilbert Montier, and he is French nobility.
I'm being beaten up by a guy called Rupert.
Which is weird because King Louis of France made it illegal for French nobility or French officers to go help in the American Revolution. And Gilbert over here at 19 years old said, fuck that, I'm gonna go fight in the American Revolution anyways, because I want to. This kid is the equivalent of like a billionaire back then, okay? He had an inheritance that granted him $50,000 a month back in the 1700s. It's millions of dollars today. He went down in France to a harbor, bought a ship, sailed it to America, and then got in with George Washington and started helping fight against the British. And later on, he is the one that would convince France to help America in the Revolution. It's not an exaggeration to say that if this rich kid didn't get a wild hair up his ass to go fight the British, America might not even exist today. And now Peter Francisco is sitting next to him in the field hospital, and they've just become best friends. So they're hanging out in this hospital tent for a few days. They become really good buddies. Marquis de Lafayette's gonna get shipped out to a bigger hospital for more care. And Peter Francisco, he's young, he's a giant, he's a freak of nature. He's already healed and well enough to get back on the front lines. So before they go to part ways, Marquis de Lafayette is like, hey, what do you want? What can I do for you? I want like a token of gratitude, you know, of our friendship or whatever. And Peter Francisco's kind of caught off guard and he's like, I don't know. I guess I could really use a sword, like a big one, bigger than the tiny ones that you guys are all carrying around. And Marquis de Lafayette is like, obviously, a giant sword for a giant man. I'll talk to Washington for you. And that's it. They part ways, and that's the last he hears of it for a while. From here, Peter Francisco participates at the Battle of Germantown, which would ultimately be another American loss. After that, he is detached from the 10th Virginia Regiment and reassigned to a light infantry unit that is, at this point in time, the cream of the crop, the best America has to offer, in many ways, the Special Forces Green Berets of their day. With his new unit, he sees combat at Fort Mifflin, also known as Mud Island, which would ultimately culminate in another American loss before they have to bed down for winter at Valley Forge. We have no idea of Peter's personal story at Valley Forge, but it's probably because it sucked and nobody wanted to remember it. Basically, they sat there all through winter, froze their ass off. They had very little clothing. Some guys didn't have shoes. They were all starving and afflicted with disease, and a ton of people died. Coming out of winter in Valley Forge, the war resumes, and Peter next sees combat at the Battle of Monmouth in June of 1778. Tactically speaking, this battle results in a draw, which isn't great, but up until this point, America was kind of getting their asses beat every time they met them. Now, coming out of Valley Forge, they appear to be fighting better. So that's good. As for Peter Francisco specifically, he gets shot in the leg again, which he proceeds to walk it off and go to his next battle. And that battle is at Stony Point. All right, here's what's going on at the Battle of Stony Point. Stony Point has this fort. This fort is considered impregnable and overlooks the Hudson River, so no ships could get past it without taking cannon fire. Pretty strategic position. The Americans had control of it. The British, utilizing their massive navy, took a bunch of troops up there, took it over, sending the message to George Washington and the Revolution, hey, we got the bigger navy, we can do what the fuck we want. To which George Washington famously replied, and I quote, Bet. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't actually say that, but his actions did. George Washington personally rides up there to evaluate the impregnable defenses of Stony Point, and he comes up with a plan. But first, he needs more intel. He needs to know the weaknesses of this fort from inside the fort. So he has an officer pretend to surrender under a white flag, get inside the fort, and then take a bunch of mental notes of what the best strategy would be. And when he gets that intel back to him, they come to the conclusion that the backside is going to be the weakest. To which George Washington is like, all right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our most elite unit, our best guys, the light infantry that Peter Francisco is currently in. We're going to have them, under the cover of night, sneak around the backside, scale the cliffs, scale the wall of the fort, get in there with bayonets, and kill everybody. In order to do that, we're going to launch a distraction. I'm going to move a bunch of troops up to the fort from the land. We're going to open fire with muskets and cannons at night so I have their attention, and the guys with the bayonets are going to come up from behind them and take the entire fort. And they're not just winging this, they've thought this out. They take white pieces of paper and have all the American troops stick them in their hats. That way they can identify each other in the darkness of night. They send scouts out days before to get rid of all the stray dogs so they don't have to worry about a dog barking.
Hell yeah.
And the guys that are going to go around the back end and scale the wall are ordered not to even load their muskets because they don't want to misfire. They're going to scale the wall and get straight into a knife fight. Okay, I'm speculating here, but I'm assuming Peter Francisco is pumped about being on this mission. Okay, he doesn't like the whole let's stand in a line and fire our muskets. He's not that good at shooting a rifle. He is good, however, at beating the shit out of people up and close because he's a giant. And that is why he's given a special mission within the special mission. Peter, you're going to be the one that gets to the flagpole and rips down their colors. Okay, because you got to remember, this is back in the day. This is basically a giant game of capture the flag. If I get to your flagpole, rip the colors down, and raise my colors, I win. So we're sending in Peter Francisco to take out whoever you've got guarding that flagpole. I don't know who you guys got playing goalie over there, but they're about to have a bad day. The plan kicks off on July 16th, 1779, right at midnight when Washington has his men start opening fire on the front side of the fort. After the attack is underway and the British begin firing back, they have the British's attention. The light infantry moves around the outside, being led by Lieutenant James Gibbons. They wade through the waters of the Hudson River, then they scale the walls of the fort, and the first man over the wall is Lieutenant James Gibbons, and the man right behind him is Peter Francisco. As the rest of the men scale the wall, they begin their bayonet attack, and Peter Francisco heads straight to the flagpole. As he approaches it, it is being guarded by a single man, and then the British alarm goes off, but it's too late. There's already hundreds of American light infantry inside the fort. As Peter bears down on this lone sentry, the sentry becomes aware of the presence of Peter, and judging by the oh shit look on his face, he's already fired his musket, and he doesn't have enough time to reload. At this point, Peter charges, and to the sentry's credit, the guy stands his ground, and he lunges at Peter and attempts to bayonet him. Peter quickly takes one hand off of his rifle, swats this guy's bayonet away. The bayonet just grazes his abdomen, giving him a 9-inch gash across his stomach, and stabs him with the other arm. Peter then presumably removes the British colors, hoists the American flag, and guards the flagpole for the remainder of the battle, which only lasts about 25 minutes before every redcoat inside the fortress is killed and or captured. Now it's at this point that I need to keep
Just for the record, in my personal opinion, this is just my conclusion from knowing history and stuff. The symbols matter. Now, I understand that people, and this is another reason why I can't stand when people like disrespect our flag and stuff. It's not the fact, it's just fabric. Symbolism matters. It matters, right? For thousands of years, symbolism has mattered. And in battle, people brought the flag. You knew who they were. They were proud of who they stood for. Stop messing with stuff. She's over. You can't see her. She's under the desk over there. Sorry. But it just like there was one video I did where the one guy stopped. It was the island one. He stopped Oak Island. Anyway, he stopped the battle because he saw all of the flags, because he thought we were losing, because that's how you knew. If your flag went down, that means like the battle is like, you stand your ground. You do not let them get to your flag. That is everything. They carried the flags into battle. You saw on the Patriot him running through. That's a real thing. It inspired the soldiers. It inspired everyone. It gave them hope. They would look to the symbol. This is representative of what I'm fighting for. And it would renew their hope, because when you're in the middle of all of this and everything, and for example, like in a terrible abusive relationship, when you're in the middle of all of it, everything is happening and you're starting to lose hope, like, what is going on? Why am I doing this? You look for the symbols and the signs of a better life, something different, what you're fighting for, why you're still around, why you're going to keep going at all costs. In my case, it was my kids. And, you know, in this case, it's the flag. It's the symbol of the revolution. It's the symbol of their country. It's a symbol of what they're fighting for. Rant over. Sorry about that. I don't know. It's why it makes me so mad that people disrespect the flag. It's not because, like, it's a piece of paper and you tore it down and you threw it in the trash can. It's not that. It's literally purposefully crapping on a symbol that means so much to so many people. It's disrespectful.
Minutes before every redcoat inside the fortress is killed and or captured. Now it's at this point that I need to keep us on track here. Peter Francisco is 19 years old. He's already fought in multiple battles in the Revolutionary War. He's been shot in the leg twice. He now has a 9-inch saber wound across his abdomen, and he spent winter in Valley Forge freezing and starving to death. At this point, it's probably time to take a break.
Let's do this. Leroy! Oh my God, he just ran in.
Yeah, so anyways, the next battle he fights in is Paulus Hook about a month later. We don't know much about what Peter did during this battle, but it was said that he stalked and killed 2 British grenadiers despite his injuries. Next couple of months after that were pretty uneventful, and by December, the army's getting ready to winter down in New Jersey, and Peter Francisco's enlistment is up, so he decides that he's gonna go home.
Drunken side quest. Oh, let's go.
So Peter heads back home, and when he gets there, to his surprise, his aura has kind of shifted in relation to everybody else. He's used to getting stared at and getting looks out in public, but it was always, holy shit, look at the size of that one. And now it's, holy shit, that's Peter Francisco, the war hero. People now know who he is. He has respect from pretty much everybody. Aside from that, life just kind of goes back to normal. He's living at Huntington Tower with his dad, and he's shoeing horses. He's working on the plantation. He's just doing Peter Francisco stuff for like 6 months. Except for, you know, now he does have a new thing. He does like to go out drinking with the boys at the local tavern because, well, he served with a lot of these guys. The 10th Virginia Regiment was all recruited from the same general area, and a lot of them also finished their enlistment and came back home. So now he's got a new group of buddies. Then one day the boys are out drinking at the bar. They're having a couple of beers, and then some sergeant from the army comes in and he starts trying to recruit people. Obviously, this starts with swapping war stories, people talking up Peter Francisco, how awesome he is. Next thing you know, Peter Francisco wakes up the next morning after a bender and is then informed that he got so drunk he re-enlisted in the army. And then it gets worse when he realizes that wasn't a Continental Army recruiter, that was a recruiter for the Virginia militia. Okay, I need you to understand how ridiculous.
Okay, so at least he didn't get conscripted, right? Because they used to do that. They used to have, like, you would go to a bar, they would have like a trap door because they had tunnel systems. Not every bar has tunnel systems, but there are certain ones that were like made, especially if I'm not mistaken, on the Pacific coast, if I'm not mistaken. And you would, like harbor towns and stuff, they would go to the bar and you just never knew because you would get drunk, have a good time, and they'd be like, hey, come on, man, yeah, let's go over here. And then they would literally drop you down through the trap door into the tunnels, and they would have cages, and they would lock people into these cells until the next time that a ship came through, and they would force them to work on the ships. And they would get a kickback. The people, like, whether it was the people at the bar or the people that were trolling around at the bar, like gangs that would gang up and do this, and they would make money. So yeah, like, you just, I mean, at least he volunteered, I guess, is better than, I mean, I would love to see someone try to keep him down, but okay. This is crazy.
Recruiter for the Virginia militia.
Ow. Sorry, ow.
Okay, I need you to understand how ridiculous this is. Peter Francisco was basically top-level Special Forces operator of his day. He was trained by Frederick von Steuben with the Light Infantry. He shared the battlefield with Marquis de Lafayette and George Washington, and he just got drunk and accidentally enlisted in the militia. This is like Rambo joining the National Guard, okay? Like, not that there's anything wrong with serving in the National Guard, it's just we weren't expecting that caliber of person to come through the doors. You know what I mean? It's like a high school football team drafting Marshawn Lynch for their running back.
If you just run through somebody's face, a lot of people ain't gonna be able to take that over and 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 over.
But you know what? Judge Winston didn't raise him to be a bitch. He said he was going to do it, so he goes off and does it. So Peter shows up to the militia. He recognizes some other guys there. Like, there's some guys that have previous actual Continental Army experience, so that's good. But everybody else is just untrained, whoever Joe Blow that showed up with their own gun. Then the man in charge of the militia, Colonel William Mayo, sees Peter Francisco walking by, and he's like, oh shit, that's Peter Francisco. Hey, come here. Yeah, you're my bodyguard now. Shortly thereafter, he finds himself being the bodyguard for Colonel William Mayo at the Battle of Camden. Now, at the Battle of Camden, the Americans line up against the British. It's 2,100 Americans versus 4,000 British. The Americans have 1,500 regulars, Continental Army guys, and 600 militia. Peter Francisco and the militia are off to one side of the formation, and the battle kicks off. They're trading volleys back and forth, and the British start marching towards them. So the Virginia militia starts marching at them as well. Now, the problem here is a lot of militia at the time didn't have bayonets. All of the British have bayonets. So another volley or two gets fired back and forth, and then it becomes apparent they're about to get into a bayonet fight, and they don't have bayonets, at which point some of them turn around and start running. And then more, and then more, and then more. They're just running past Colonel Mayo and Peter Francisco. Peter Francisco and the Colonel are yelling at their guys, trying to form them back up, trying to reassure them. It's not working. These guys are running for the wood line. And very quickly, it goes from Colonel Mayo trying to get his men to stand their ground to, hey guys, can we at least bring the cannons with us, please? I mean, we're in a war. These are kind of important. They're hard to come by. We don't want to lose them to the British. We're going to need these for later. Let's grab the guns. Nobody listens. They keep running for the wood line. Thinking fast, Peter Francisco evaluates the situation, looks at the gun. The horses that were pulling it are dead now, and he just kind of like walks around it real quick, then lifts it and breaks the cannon tube free from like the wheels and the yoke, and then proceeds to pick it up onto his shoulder and carry it to behind the Continental line because the Continentals are still in the fight. Now, according to legend, this cannon barrel weighed 1,100 pounds, which let's be honest here, that's not humanly possible. There's nobody on the planet that can lift 1,100 pounds. The strongest men today that are Peter Francisco's height or taller and weigh 400 pounds can barely deadlift 1,000 pounds, let alone hoist up an irregular shaped tube of metal onto their shoulder and carry it through a field. And we know this because they got together and they tried. Eddie Hall, Brian Shaw, and Robert Oberst, some of the strongest humans to ever walk the face of the planet, with the benefits of steroids and modern science, and they were unable to lift a cannon that was even 400 pounds and complete this feat. They came to the consensus that this cannon probably could have weighed somewhere between 300 and 350 pounds, which is the approximate weight of what a smaller cannon during the Revolutionary War would have weighed. Buh, so he doesn't have superhuman strength. I can lift 300 pounds in the gym. Buh, you can shut the fuck up. You can lift 300 pounds in the gym after you've stretched and warmed up, and that weight is perfectly balanced and designed to be picked up by a human, and then you can lift it in a very strict mechanical motion. Your ass is not about to pick up a 300-pound metal object that is irregular shaped with a weird weight that you can't get a grip on, hoist it onto your shoulder, and farmers carry it through a battlefield while you're getting ran down by British dragoons. Is the 1,100-pound cannon thing an embellishment? Almost certainly. They probably took the weight of the actual cannon plus the wheels plus the yoke and everything else and said it was 1,100 pounds. But in reality, this man just carried a 350-pound cannon through a battlefield. He is a freak of nature. Cutting back to the actual battle, Peter Francisco.
Okay, so for the record, he's absolutely right when it comes to the gym. I go to the gym. I am definitely nowhere near 300 pounds, for sure. Lifting. I there's no way. So I'm like in the low to mid, like 120, 130, 150 if I'm feeling froggy for like a couple reps. That's about it. Legs, I'm more in the 200s. It just is what it is. You wouldn't think it, right? Because I look pretty soft. But I'm trying, okay? Working on it. But he's completely right. I saw somebody, I'm just going to say this. I actually had to I messaged Cliff about it earlier. I was like, there was this, she's bite-sized. She's the cutest thing. She's so sweet. And I've been working out, like not with her, but we see each other all the time for months, like since last year. She's tiny, all muscle. She is strong as shit. She's doing the one where you stand like and it's on like the track. She's on the ground, one leg kneeling, the other leg. So here's one leg kneeling. The other leg is this. She's got one leg stretched out and she's doing squats with the weight, with big plates on it. And I'm like, am I I can't get that low. I cannot get that low. I can't do squats. My knees won't let me, but I would never get up again. That would be it. I would do one because I would go down and stay down. I was just like, out of my side eye, I was like, the whole time. I swear to God. But anyway, that was a fun little gym story. Back to the battle. You ready? Let's go. By the way, mob mentality. You know, when like people, they say that you see one person running in a theater, everyone starts running, that type of vibe. People start retreating and they're running. Have you noticed that he was talking about the militias running? The Continental Army's still there, right? Because they're trained. They know this is how you do it. The militia is a little bit more ragtag. They're a little bit more inexperienced, and they're a little bit more Farmer Bob, you know, holding his pitchfork going, oh shit, and running. And then they're all running because like, oh God, what do we do? They're not trained, right? Not like that. Not to that level is the assumption I'm making. And as always, you guys, I do read every single comment. You can correct me in the comments. I don't mind it one little bit. Anything that I do say, if I get it wrong, it's never out of disrespect, I promise. It's never meant in disrespect. It's meant from a perspective that might not be completely correct. And I'm happy to stand corrected if I ever need to. And I don't mind, and I enjoy when you guys let me know some more information and elaborate on things. So thank you for that. I do see the comments. Let's go. Back to the battle.
Cannon through a battlefield. He is a freak of nature. Cutting back to the actual battle, Peter Francisco drags his cannon back to the Continental line, gets it to relative safety, and then he hears Colonel Mayo yell, and he turns around and sees that Colonel Mayo is being held at gunpoint by a British grenadier, and he's like, oh shit, I'm supposed to protect that guy. So he immediately grabs his musket and shoots that British grenadier. That guy drops, the colonel's saved, and then immediately there's a British guy on a horse with a sword barreling down on the colonel. Peter Francisco quickly runs, shoves the colonel out of the way, stabs this British guy off of his horse, and then chases down and grabs the horse. By the time he gets his horse, he's like a couple 100 yards away from the colonel, so thinking fast, needing to get this horse back to the colonel, he grabs a hat off of a dead British guy, puts it on his head, and then he takes his coat off, so he's just rolling around with his undershirt with a British hat on, so the British are just assuming he's one of them, rides through the rest of the battle straight to the colonel, hops off the horse, gets the colonel on the horse, and says, get the fuck out of here. The colonel takes off on the horse, okay, cool, did my job, looks at the rest of the battlefield, the Continentals are starting to retreat this point, America's kind of getting its ass kicked, so he's like, I guess I'm going to the wood line too, goes back to the wood line, and he's like, I guess my enlistment's over? My unit's just been disbanded? Fuck this, I'm going home. Which is exactly what he does, thus concluding one of the greatest I got drunk at a bar once with my buddies stories ever. I mean, you talk about dad lore. Like, Dad, what were you like when you were younger? Oh, let me tell you, son, me and my friends got drunk at a bar once. I accidentally enlisted in the Virginia militia, found myself at the Battle of Camden, where I picked up a 350-pound cannon, carried it to safety, and then I had to spear a guy off of a horse to save the colonel.
And I killed a guy with a trident.
And the best part, Colonel Mayo never forgot about me saving his ass, so when he passed away in his will, he left me 1,000 acres of land and gave me this decorative sword.
This is a sword that was given to Peter Francisco, a hero of the American Revolution.
Oh no, here we go.
So Peter Francisco goes home for a little bit, then he starts getting that itch again. He's like, man, riding that horse through the battlefield was kind of fun. Fuck it, I'm gonna go re-enlist again.
What did I tell you in one of the other videos? I mean, you might not have watched every one of my videos, but I do talk about this. There are some people that are just warriors. That's who they are. And they tend to be restless when they are just living a normal life. A lot of people that have done, that are built different, they're built for military, or they're warriors, they can't assimilate back into normal everyday 9-to-5 job, carry a briefcase, smooch the wife on the way out the door, pat the kids on the head. That's just not who they are. And way back in history, that was respected. Warriors were respected. Now we shit on them, which is not right, because, oh, you're just an aggressive ass, toxic ass dude. That's not how it is. People are built different. Just like there's intellectuals that they have to be constantly learning and researching and, diving into doing scientific-y stuff, it's the same, but it's just different. Everyone's built different. Be respectful.
Like, man, riding that horse through the battlefield was kind of fun. Fuck it, I'm gonna go re-enlist again. Now, technically, he does wind up joining the militia again, but this time it's not a new, propped-up, green militia unit that's never seen combat. This is an established militia that's been fighting for a while, and it's a cavalry unit. Buh, you said cavalry. Buh. No, I didn't. Okay, look, I talk fast, and when you talk fast, the words kind of sound similar, but I promise you, I'll put us all on the same page right now, okay? Peter Francisco will be riding a horse into battle, not the hill Jesus died on, although that would be way cooler. Now, shut up. Anyways, the militia's not, like, on its own.
I was like, wait a minute, what is he saying? Cavalry versus cavalry.
Jesus died on, although that would be way cooler. Now shut up. Anyways, the militia's not like on its own doing militia stuff. They're immediately going to report to Colonel William Washington to join his cavalry, and they're going to be fighting in the next battle. So he's basically a regular. And when Francisco's unit does get to Colonel William Washington, this militia unit is oddly well equipped. Bayonets, new guns, the whole 9 yards. And when they get asked about it, they are informed that, oh, well, Peter Francisco, along the way there, decided that he was going to sneak into a British outpost and steal a bunch of shit and wheel it out under the dark of night with a hog sled. So go
wait, I want to see that shirt.
British outpost and steal a bunch.
Steal to strategically transfer equipment to alternative locations. That's great. CEA. Nice.
Bunch of shit and wheel it out under the dark of night with a hog sled. So go ahead and add world's biggest cat burglar to this guy's resume as well. Anyways, they're like, Peter Francisco. Why do I know that name? Oh shit, we have a package for that guy. We've been trying to find him. We're supposed to give it to him. It's from George Washington. Peter has no idea what this is about, so he gets his package. It is a 5-foot-long broadsword.
Yes! That's awesome!
He had completely forgotten that Marquis de Lafayette was going to ask George Washington to custom make a broadsword for him to carry into battle. Apparently, Marquis de Lafayette did not forget. The sword is made, and now he has it. I wish I could show you a picture of the actual sword because I want to see it too. Unfortunately, the best I can tell, the sword was destroyed in the early 1900s in a museum fire in Virginia. But I believe it looks something like this, which would be terrifying to have a giant swing at you. Buh, how convenient. The sword just disappeared one day. It's almost like it's one big giant legend and myth. Buh. No, asshole, the sword existed and I can prove it because we have documentation in the Virginia State Library that in 1861, Peter Francisco's grandson tried to withdraw the sword from a museum so that he could carry it into the Civil War. We also have the testimony of the people that worked at the museum that supposedly the sword wound up at that said, yeah, there was definitely a massive fucking sword here, but I haven't seen it since that fire. And if that's still not enough to persuade you, it's literally on the bronze plaque on the monument commemorating the Battle of Guilford's Courthouse, which is also known as the Peter Francisco fucking Monument. Anyways, speaking of Guilford's Courthouse. All right, the Battle of Guilford's Courthouse. This is the beginning of the end of the American Revolution. What's going on at this point in time is America is just coming off of a humongous win at the Battle of Cowpens. Now, the Battle of Cowpens is a strategic masterpiece. It's my favorite battle of the American Revolution, carried out by my favorite general of the American Revolution, Daniel Morgan, who I've also done a video on, so we're not going to rehash the entire thing. The long and short of it is, Mel Gibson's character in the movie The Patriot, one of the guys that his character is based off of is Daniel Morgan, and the final battle scene of the movie is an amalgamation of the Battle of Cowpens and the Battle of Guilford's Courthouse. Because,
by the way, for the record, neither here nor there, when I was young, okay, so I was that kid at between 8 and 12 years old. I was at the library every week, and I remember I would have a stack of books about this tall. They're probably by like 10 to 12 books. There was a limit. You could only take out like 10. And so they were like, so I would max it out every time. And they were all autobiographies. They were all from this, I can't remember who wrote them, about historical figures, basically the story of their lives. They said, I think they were biographies, maybe not autobiography. Anyway, I read every single one. There was Daniel Webster. There was Daniel Boone. Lots of Daniels. George Washington. There was Abraham Lincoln. There was, Betsy Ross. There was all of these different people throughout history, especially early, like American history. And I read them like fun fiction books, like, just reading books. And I remember the librarian looks at me and looks at my mom. And my mom's like, no. She's like, you only get them for 2 weeks. And my mom was like, oh, we'll be back in a couple days. I still read that much, y'all. Not nonfiction anymore. I read fiction now. But anyway, I'm just saying, a lot of these names I recognize, but I was like 10. So I don't necessarily remember all of the details, and it was more about their young lives and how they became the person they became. Anyway, fun little side note. I love stuff like this.
Battle scene of the movie is an amalgamation of the Battle of Cowpens and the Battle of Guilford's Courthouse because they essentially play out the same way. Daniel Morgan forms his guys up against Bannister Tarleton, you know, Malfoy's dad from The Patriot, and they have this battle. And during this battle, Bannister Tarleton comes to the realization that Daniel Morgan has made a critical mistake. He has militia forming up the center of his formation, which is something you should never do because the militia are the guys that are most likely to break. They're not as well trained, they're not as well equipped, and they're more likely to turn and run. And if that happens, the entire formation fractures and the battle's pretty much over. So Bannister Tarleton has his men charge for the center of the formation, the militia fires a few volleys, then they turn and run, and the British give the order to chase them down. They're gonna squash the revolution right now, and the militia runs over, up the hill, down the hill, the British chase them, and then all of the militia guys dive onto the ground because there's a shit ton of regulars back there that open fire on the British. Daniel Morgan baited Bannister Tarleton. This leads to a humongous American victory where they kill, capture, or wound over 1,000 British soldiers. This is a humongous blow to the British military in the Carolinas, and the only force left is the guys underneath General Cornwallis, about 2,100 men. So now the strategy for America becomes drive this last remaining force of General Cornwallis's men out of the Carolinas. To do that, George Washington's right-hand guy, Nathaniel Greene, the fighting Quaker, is going to take his army and confront General Cornwallis at Guilford's Courthouse. After the Battle of Cowpens, Daniel Morgan's not going to make it because he's sick and bedridden after the battle, but he does take time to write Nathaniel Greene. I'm not going to read the entire letter, but the gist of it is, hey, here's how I won that battle at Cowpens. The play's not broke. Keep using it. Do it again. And Nathaniel Greene takes the advice. He forms up his front line made out of Green militia, instructs them to fire twice and then retreat. Then his second line is also made up primarily of militia, but this is experienced militia that's going to be able to put up a fight, make this believable. These guys wind up getting off somewhere between 10 and 20 volleys against the British, and then they retreat back into a wood line behind them. The British then chase them through a wood line, breaking up their formation as well, and then on the other end of this small wood line is Nathaniel Greene with all of his best guys on top of a hill with formations and cannons ready and waiting for him. And then as soon as the British enter the open field, William Washington, accompanied by Peter Francisco, is going to ride his cavalry into the flank and crush everybody. And that's pretty much more or less exactly how it plays out. Cornwallis sees the front lines made up out of militia. They break the militia line, they charge, they run into the Virginians, exchange 10 to 20 volleys. The Virginian militia retreats back into the wood line. They follow.
I believe I see militia forming at their center.
The British come through the wood line and discombobulated.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine fighting a battle for your life? Because it's life and death, right? In a field, a wide open field, you can see everything. And you know, let's say it turns for the worse. You have to run across an entire ass field to get away. The chances are next to none. You're going in there knowing full and well that's it. And then they're like, yes, and they're chasing them across this field. People are running for their lives, knowing that even while they're doing this okey doke that they're pulling on them and running to like hit the wood line, some of them are going to go down. They're not going to make it. And their job is to break and is to run and is to turn their backs and run. And here's the thing, or I would assume they're turning their backs and run because I don't run backwards very well. I don't know if anybody else does. Knowing full and well that the military is at their back, they can still stab, fire, catch up to them. However, they have to stand there, load, and then fire. It's not as easy as running and firing like it is now, like, right? So maybe they had a better chance. But can you imagine knowing that that is your role is 75 to 90% chance that you're sacrificing your life to turn the tide of this battle? And just to think that people disrespect and crap talk about what this country's been through or what people went through or what military goes through. It's nothing. It's different now, but it's still the same. They still do the same type things. They're still heroes. And it's one of the reasons it pisses me off when people are like, military. I'm like, anyway, I was just thinking like the wide open field and just knowing I don't run, so like I'd be like, oh, I'm just gonna like stand here and like be a meat fodder, a meat sacrifice. I'm not running for shit. Anyway,
I see
random thoughts.
militia forming at their center.
The British come through the wood line in discombobulated formations, just as they had planned. William Washington leads his cavalry in a charge with Peter Francisco right next to him. On the first charge, Peter Francisco cuts down 2 men with his broadsword, and then a third man spears him with his bayonet through his calf, at which point Peter Francisco's like... And then presumably the British guy looks up and sees that there's a giant on top of this horse, and he's like... He then pulls his bayonet out of Peter's calf and turns to run. Peter wheels the horse around, chases the guy down, lifts his sword, and I will now refer to an eyewitness account as to what happened next. Lieutenant Philip Holcombe, quote, Francisco's sword hit the soldier squarely on the head with such force that his head cleft in two, a half falling to each shoulder. The battle rages on. Peter Francisco allegedly kills a total of 11 men with his broadsword before ultimately catching a bayonet at his knee that rides all the way up to his hip bone, flinging him from his horse. Severely wounded, he stumbles into the wood line and loses consciousness leaned up against a tree. While he's out, the Battle of Guilford's Courthouse rages on. The Americans are inflicting heavy casualties against the British, but the British aren't giving any sign that they're about to give up. So eventually Nathaniel Greene decides, we've done enough damage, I'm not going to risk the rest of my army. He retreats. Now, despite the fact that the Americans inflicted a 2-to-1 casualty rate against the British, this is still technically and tactically a loss for America because they retreated.
It's understandable.
But strategically, and looking at the bigger picture, this was a humongous win for America because they crippled Cornwallis's army so bad that he had to retreat back to Yorktown, which set the stage for the Siege of Yorktown, which essentially was the last major battle of the American Revolution. But that's beside the point. Cutting back to Peter Francisco, who's currently dying in the wood line, he sits there for hours going in and out of consciousness, and in the hours after the battle, he's found by Quakers that take him in and nurse him back to health for weeks. Ultimately, he winds up surviving. Apparently, bacteria's even scared of this guy, but once he's well enough, he winds up walking back home over 200 miles back to Huntington Tower, Virginia. Also worth mentioning, it's said that sometime after the battle at Guilford's Courthouse and serving under William Washington recommended or offered him an officer's commission, which he refused because he couldn't read or write. This is another one of those small details that gets called out as not being true, so it casts doubt on the entire story because people are dumb and they get confused. They hear Washington, they assume George Washington.
John Hancock. It's Herbie Hancock.
Obviously, George Washington didn't recommend him to be an officer or he'd be an officer. It wasn't George Washington, it was William Washington, who he directly served with. However, we still don't have any primary sources to prove that that happened, but it doesn't seem that far-fetched because what we do have is that after the Battle of Guilford's Courthouse, Nathaniel Greene sent him a gift, a very decorative razor set with a different razor for every day of the week that is now on display in a museum in Greensboro. We still have that today. So, very high-ranking people in the Revolutionary military know of him and feel compelled to give him gifts. The notion that they would make him an officer isn't that far-fetched. Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. So the Quakers patch him up and he sets off walking 200 miles back home to Virginia.
Oh no.
So Peter Francisco's walking his happy ass back home to Virginia, and remember, this is weeks, if not months, after the Battle of Guilford's Courthouse, so a lot of the British soldiers are retreating back to Virginia, which is exactly where Peter's headed. He's by himself, he's wounded, he's got to try to not run into these guys. Everything's going fine, and then when he's in Amelia County, Virginia, he falls, he twists his knee, he's limping around. Luckily, he knows of a tavern nearby, run by a guy by the name of Ben Ward. He makes his way to the tavern, gets some food, he spends the night there, trying to let his knee rest. He is then woken up early in the morning to a sound of a bunch of horses galloping up. He looks out the window. Fuck, it's 9 British dragoons wearing green jackets, meaning that they are Bannister Tarleton's men. Remember, Bannister Tarleton, the bad guy from The Patriot, not that great of a guy. His nickname in real life was The Butcher. Peter, not really knowing what the fuck is going on and not wanting to find out, he assumes the worst. They're probably here to kill me because somebody ratted me out. So he bursts out the side door of the tavern trying to make a getaway, but there's already a dragoon there with his sword drawn, making sure nobody gets out. The dragoon tells him to stop. He stops. At this point, Peter Francisco is kind of realizing, like, okay, this guy doesn't recognize me. I'm a pretty distinct guy. Like, look for the giant. That's who we're looking for. This guy apparently isn't looking for a giant. That's good news. And then right then, all the other dragoons that are still inside the tavern start hooting and hollering because they found the booze. Okay, good. Perfect. They're not looking for me. They're just looting. They just want valuables. They want booze. They want whatever. They're not going to kill me. Just cooperate. Everything should be fine. It is at this point the dragoon in front of him says, "Hey, big man, do you have anything valuable, like a watch?" Peter Francisco reluctantly hands over his pocket watch, like, that sucks. Watches are a big deal in the 1700s, but you know what? I can always buy another watch. The dragoon takes the watch, then sizes Peter up again and says, "What about those silver buckles on your knees?"
Oh, hell no.
Today we're going to talk about how we can find out and how much we can find out.
Yeah, the same P&H silver buckles that Judge Winston gave him that he had recrafted from his shoes that he had on when he showed up to America in the first place. You thought I was giving you trivial details earlier, didn't you? No, every detail matters. And now we got a problem because these buckles aren't replaceable. They're sentimental family heirlooms.
You're gonna die for some chickens.
Someone is.
Peter Francisco immediately lunges at this poor dragoon, grabs his sword, takes it from him, and then hits him in the head, killing him instantly. The noise alerts the other dragoons inside, and within a matter of seconds, he sees a hand with a pistol coming out of the door next to him. He immediately chops that hand off. Okay, 2 down, 7 to go. At this point, the dragoons inside the tavern think that they're getting ambushed. One of them runs out the front and jumps on his horse to go back and alert the formation that he came from. Peter Francisco runs up and spears him off the horse, lifting him off the horse on his sword. By this point, he realizes the 6 remaining dragoons on the inside think they're getting ambushed, so he plays into it and he yells, "Come on, boys, they're in the tavern, let's get them." This causes the remaining dragoons to run out the back on foot, fleeing back to their formation. Not only does this buy Peter Francisco more time to get away because they're not going to make it back to their formation as fast, he now has a bunch of horses. So he lashes them all together in a straight line and takes off.
Don't really remember how many. Maybe one.
Tarleton's men never end up catching up to him. On his way home, he sells all but one of the horses, this big, white, beautiful horse that he jokingly names Tarleton. Later in life, he would write that this bar fight was the last favor he ever did for the British, and the bar fight itself is commemorated by a painting that now hangs in the Virginia State Capitol in Richmond. Okay, again, just to reiterate, this man has the most gangster dad lore on the planet. Like, Dad, did you ever get into a bar fight? Let me tell you something, son. When Dad gets into a bar fight, they make an oil painting to commemorate it, and they hang it in the state capitol. So Peter Francisco makes it back home in one piece. He's back at Huntington Tower with his dad, Judge Winston, and he is now a whopping 21 years old. By today's standard, he's finally old enough to have a beer. Not really knowing what to do, he just kind of picks up where he left off. He starts standard. He's finally old. Judge Winston, and he is now a whopping 21 years old. By today's standard, he's finally old enough to have a beer.
This whole time, it didn't dawn on me. I just didn't realize he has been between the ages of... That's right, because he started when he was 16. So technically, I'm thinking this happened over a span of years. It did. The problem is that he was 16, 17, 18 years old. Okay. Most 21-year-olds I know wouldn't be able to find their ass a way out of a paper bag with a razor. Right? Hard times create good men. Good men create good times. Good times create soft men. Soft men create hard times. Guess what era we're in?
Now a whopping 21 years old. By today's standard, he's finally old enough to have a beer. Not really knowing what to do, he just kind of picks up where he left off. He starts working on the plantation, he's shoeing horses, and this goes on for a couple of months, and he's making sure he keeps up on the news with what's going on with the war, and then eventually he hears that America's getting ready to challenge the British over at Yorktown, and his buddy's gonna be there, Marquis de Lafayette.
Oh, say less!
Peter Francisco's like, say less, I'm gonna go see my homies, so he hops on Tarleton and rides off to Yorktown, has no issue getting through the front lines as he's riding up on this white horse. Holy shit, that's Peter Francisco, the Virginia giant. Makes his way up to Marquis de Lafayette, they get reunited, they start hanging out, they catch up, everything's going great. And then allegedly, around this point in time, Marquis de Lafayette asks Peter Francisco to be his personal aide.
Whose car are we gonna take?
Then, as the story goes, he was right there by Marquis de Lafayette for the entire Battle of Yorktown. Obviously, Marquis de Lafayette wasn't like up there fixing bayonets on the very, very front lines. He was a battlefield commander. He was, coordinating the battle, but Peter Francisco was right there with him in case anything went down. America goes on to win the Battle of Yorktown. The British surrender. America becomes its own country. And after that, Peter Francisco's like, I don't really have shit else to do, so he just kind of hangs out with Marquis de Lafayette, being part of his entourage.
Oh, Beauty and the Beast.
Shortly after the war, Marquis de Lafayette's getting ready to go back home to France, but before he does that, he's got some fancy parties to attend down in Richmond, Virginia. So Peter Francisco, best friend and bodyguard extraordinaire, accompanies him. So one day, Peter and Lafayette are walking down the street right past St. John's Church, the same St. John's Church that Peter had heard Patrick Henry say the famous line, "Give me liberty or give me death," a few years back that started this entire journey. So Peter's telling Lafayette that, like,
it's just insane how all of these, and by the way, the older I get, because, super young, the older I get, the more that I start to realize that the world is smaller than you think, because people tend to resonate with other people that, like, you're going to meet people that like the same things you like because you're in situations that are related to things that you like. So the chances of you meeting people that know the same authors, that know the same artists, that like the same vibe of music is pretty high, because those are the types of people you tend to surround yourself with, right? If you're going to meet somebody at a concert, I gotta get a hold of her. Anyway, you meet somebody at a concert, they most likely like that kind of music too. And so the world just gets smaller and smaller. And the more that you expand your network, you start to realize how many people actually kind of know each other. It's very interesting how they're doing all of this traveling. They're doing it on horseback and on foot. And yet they're going back to these huge, huge places, locations that were so impactful earlier on in the story. It's just the way it's so intricate. Now people are so, they don't do that anymore necessarily. If you were to tell someone's story, it probably wouldn't have these recurring locations or whatever, like this person inspired me and then they went on to do all of these amazing things. We don't know about these inspiring people now until after it's all said and done. If that makes any sense. It made sense in my head before I said it. But anyway, back to the story.
Or give me death a few years back that started this entire journey. So Peter's telling Lafayette that, like, hey, I was here when Patrick Henry said the famous line. And as he's telling this story, somebody falls down right in front of Peter Francisco. Not even thinking about it, he just lunges forward and catches this person, looks down, and it's the most beautiful woman he's ever seen in his entire life. Blonde hair, blue eyes, the whole 9 yards. They lock eyes and they are just staring at each other for an awkward amount of time. And then as the story goes, Lafayette has to tell Peter to put her down. Peter gets her on her feet. She says, thank you. They part ways. They keep walking. Lafayette starts giving Peter a hard time. Like, dude, when are you going to find a wife? Women are literally throwing themselves at you. And from here, they just carry on about their day. It was just, weird. Something that happened. Whatever. Moving on. That evening, they go to a fancy officers party together. And, before they get there, they're obviously the main attraction. It's Marquis de Lafayette and his bodyguard giant hero, Peter Francisco. Everybody's talking about them showing up. Everybody wants to meet him. When they get there, Peter Francisco immediately locks eyes again with this same blonde-haired, blue-eyed hottie. They get formally introduced. Her name is Susan Anderson, and she comes to the realization that the humongous hunk that saved her from falling earlier that day is also a war hero living legend. They go out to the garden together, they kiss, they basically both confess love at first sight, but Susan says that you need to talk to her father first and get his permission to call on.
Does.
Nothing wrong with that. That's completely within the realm of standard practice back in the day, especially in the aristocratic circles. So Peter Francisco goes and talks to Captain James Anderson, a military officer from an extremely wealthy family. And James Anderson, he's He's sympathetic, but he's not having it. He's like, ultimately, he basically says, look, Peter, I respect everything you do. Obviously, you're a man's man. That's great. But look, my daughter's used to a certain, way of living life. She's used to certain amenities. And you, as far as I can tell, are uneducated. You don't have a job. You don't own land. You don't come from money. And you're not going to be able to provide her with the same lifestyle that the other suitor that she's currently talking to, some other military officer from a fancy aristocratic family, he can give her all of that. And you can't give her any of it. And I have to do what's best for my daughter. Peter Francisco, discouraged, but also not giving up, basically
slightly valid. Like, I understand that. You want the best for your children. You want them to do better than what you grew up with. You want them to have more, do better, have a better life. And love versus, security and comfort. And, he thinks he's doing what's best for his daughter. And I respect that. He's being sincere, he's being straightforward, and he's telling him, and that matters. Now let's see if they care, or if they go and they run off together. Let's see.
Give her any of it, and I have to do what's best for my daughter. Peter Francisco, discouraged, but also not giving up, basically tells Captain Anderson, look, I'm not asking to marry her tomorrow. I'm uneducated, but I can get educated. I don't have money, but I can get money. I don't have land. I don't have all these things, but I can get these things.
Nice recovery.
Captain Anderson, obviously skeptical. They part ways. Susan runs up to Peter. She tells him she heard everything. She was eavesdropping on the conversation. She tells him that she loves him and she's gonna wait for him. The next day, Peter and Marquis de Lafayette part ways for now, and he heads back off home to Hunting Tower, Virginia. So Peter Francisco returns home. He's as motivated as ever. He has a very tight, very short to-do list. Get an education, get rich, get land, get laid. That's the plan. First thing on that to-do list, get an education. He's gonna have to learn how to read and write, and this is 1781 in Virginia, okay? They don't have GED programs floating around. There's only one way he's gonna get this done, and it's to go back to elementary school.
Back to school, to prove to Dad that I'm not a fool.
Yes, 6'6", 280-pound Virginia giant, claymore-wielding war hero is gonna Billy Madison this shit. Luckily, his teacher, Mr. McGraw, winds up being cool as shit, and on the very first day of class, he knows how cruel and how mean little kids can be, so at the very beginning of the first day of class, he brings Peter Francisco up in front of the class and explains to the kids, like, hey, kids, this is Peter. He doesn't know how to read or write because he spent so much time in the army fighting the British, he never had time to learn, so we need to help him. Also, Peter's the strongest man in the entire army. Peter, show him how strong you are. And then he has Peter lift him up so high that his head touches the ceiling, and the kids are just blown away. Now the kids are on his side. They want to help Peter, and Peter is, in many ways, part of the gang with this group of kids. There's not much to it other than that. He goes to school for a couple of years, learns how to read and write, but there is one other story where apparently the kids would pull pranks on each other all the time, and eventually Peter Francisco decides to pull a prank of his own where he sneaks off and eats all the desserts from all the lunches by himself. Mr. McGraw knows who did it immediately because obviously there's only one person that could have physically done it. It's the 6-foot-tall giant. It wasn't one of the 8-year-olds running around elementary school. So Mr. McGraw, who's pretty good friends with Peter at this point, tells Peter in front of the class, gotta face your punishment just like everybody else. You're a part of the class. And the punishment at this point in time is getting bent over a desk and whipped with a switch. To which Peter is like, come on, I'm a grown-ass man. You're not gonna whip me with a switch over the table in front of all these kids. And Mr. McGraw's like, you can take the punishment like everybody else, or you can go home. To which Peter's like, all right, whatever. And then he proceeds to get whipped with a switch just like one of the kids would in front of the whole class. Now, at the same time, while he's also going to school, elementary school obviously doesn't take all day, so he's working on making money as soon as school gets out, and one of the first things he does is he takes all his money from serving in the military, he has a military pension coming in, and all the money that he took from selling off Tarleton's horses, and he invests it into his own blacksmith shop and general store. So he's making good money doing that. He starts acquiring land while he's still going to school, and then he accidentally stumbles into this new side gig. Whenever there was, a town event, a dance, whatever, and there was an issue or a fight, he was always the guy that broke broke it up. He was basically town security, you know? He's a big teddy bear. He wants to make sure everybody's safe. He didn't mind doing it. Well, that would eventually turn into all the local tough guys would want to see if they're the tough guy, and they would challenge Peter Francisco to a fight, and people would bet on him, and Peter would get paid for winning, and Peter never lost. And then it went from local tough guys to regional tough guys, and then it just became a normal thing in town for some big burly woodsman to stagger in, wanting to challenge Peter Francisco to prove that he was the baddest man on the planet, only to find out he in fact was not. And this goes on for the next 3 years, and then in 1784, he's finally finished school. He knows how to read, he knows how to write, he's made a bunch of money, he has a successful business, he owns hundreds of acres of land, he goes back to Richmond, Virginia, and he marries Susan. And for a brief moment, everything's perfect. They have their first 2 kids, and then everything goes tragically wrong. Their 3rd child dies, and then shortly after that, his dad, Judge Winston, also passes away. And then shortly after that, his wife Susan becomes sick and also passes, and he is now a single father to 2 kids. From here, he does the best that he can. He keeps running his businesses. He keeps having dudes come into town to fight him all the time, but he never loses, and he takes the kids back to Richmond to see their grandparents pretty frequently. Over the years in Richmond, he has frequent run-ins with one of his wife's best friends, a woman by the name of Catherine Brooke, and over the years, they fall in love, and then they get married almost 10 years after the passing of his wife. They're madly in love. They wind up having 4 more kids. Peter's running his businesses. Everything's going great. Everything is perfect. And then the War of 1812 happens. Peter and Susan's oldest son, James, enlists in the army to go off and fight for America just like his dad did. But you know what? Even though Peter Francisco is 52 years old at this point, he's not about to let his son go off and do it alone. He's joining the army too. Okay, to be honest, we have no idea in what capacity Peter Francisco served in the War of 1812, but it was confirmed by the Department of Veteran Affairs in 1940 that Peter Francisco did serve in the 5th Infantry Regiment in the United States Army in the War of 1812. Whatever happens with him in the War of 1812, we don't know, but we do know he survives and he comes back home to Catherine and resumes his normal life, running his businesses, raising his kids, the whole 9 yards. Catherine and Peter go on to live happily married for 27 years in total until yet again tragedy strikes in 1821 when Catherine becomes ill and also passes away. Peter is now 61 years old. His wife has passed away. The kids are all grown up. They've moved out, and he is completely alone. Several years later, in 1823, he would be at some fancy aristocratic party, and he would meet another widow, a woman by the name of Mary West from England, and she had also lost her husband, and she fell in love with Peter Francisco, the Virginia giant, and they got married. Unfortunately, the 3rd time is not the charm because as far as I can tell, she was a giant pain in the ass the entire time. This may be shocking to some of you, but apparently a fancy aristocratic woman from England doesn't really enjoy living in the back countries of Virginia with a giant blacksmith. But that's what they're doing, so they go back to the country. She's living out there in, you know, his farmhouse out in the woods in Virginia. It's not fancy like she's used to. She's bitching about it the entire time. She doesn't really care for it. And then about a year later, in 1824, Peter Francisco gets word that Marquis de Lafayette is coming back to America.
Yes! We know each other. He's a friend from work.
Okay, Peter Francisco's pumped. His homie's coming back to town from across an ocean. He hasn't seen him in like 40 years. He goes to tell his wife, and she's like, I'm not going. My dresses haven't been taken care of. Our carriage isn't nice enough. I can't be seen like this. I'm a wealthy woman. This would be embarrassing. I'm not going. And Peter Francisco's like, whatever, I'm fucking going to see Gilbert. So he heads off to meet Marquis de Lafayette. On the way, he lets his kids know, like, hey, I'm going to meet my buddy. This is basically your uncle if you guys want to come see him. All the kids come too, and he is reunited with Marquis de Lafayette. They have a big hug, at which point they catch up a little bit, and Marquis de Lafayette looks at his buddy, Peter Francisco, and says, you know, I'm like doing this tour thing. We're going from like town to town, Yorktown, Richmond. They're throwing parties for me everywhere because I'm kind of an American hero. I could use a bodyguard. For a week, Peter Francisco and Gilbert go town to town having a fucking ball. It's a great time. And then after about a week, it's finally time to go home and patch things up with the wife, Mary. Luckily, he's not coming back empty-handed. He's got good news because while he was on this week-long bender, he ran into one of his friends, a Virginia State House delegate, Charles Yancey, and Charles Yancey offered him the job as the House of Delegates Sergeant-at-Arms for the state government of Virginia. And that job comes with an apartment in the prestigious Columbia Hotel in Richmond, Virginia, the state capital.
Pack your shit up.
So Peter gets to come back home and is like, hey, everything you've hated for the past couple of years, it's all over. We're moving into a fancy apartment in a fancy hotel in the city capital, and you can live your, aristocratic lifestyle, and I just have to be the sergeant at arms and kick people's asses, which is what I've been doing forever anyways. And for the next 6 years, Peter Francisco, at the age of 63 years old, served as the sergeant at arms for the Virginia State House of Delegates. And you gotta remember, this is the 1800s. We're still well into the era of politicians getting riled up and beating the shit out of each other. And Peter Francisco is going to be the guy in the room that's there to settle everything down.
Okay. You know this is coming. You know this is coming. And you can't tell me you don't kind of feel low-key the same way. I think sometimes some of these politicians need their ass beat. Shit that comes out of their mouths. There are some that sit there, and on both sides, I'm going to say on both sides, but I'm kind of low-key biased because I just saw one this morning. I didn't mean to. YouTube starts playing if you just are on it. Anyway. Sometimes people just say the most ignorant shit. And they sit there and it's the gun laws in the United States. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Bitch, shut up. If you know, you know, and if you don't, it's no big deal. I'm not going to explain it. Just, if you ever see the same thing I'm talking about, you'll know because you're going to say, bitch, shut up about, yeah. Sometimes I wish they would kind of get in a cage and beat the snot out of each other. They would probably be a little bit more respectful if there were consequences to the vile shit that comes out of their mouths.
The shit out of each other. And Peter Francisco.
Oh, and by the way, I didn't say this before. I do think, and I don't care who it is, I do think that presidents should have had time in the military. I think that should have been a requirement, should be a requirement. If they're the commander of the military, they should have military experience. They should at least understand it. It's like you shouldn't run a restaurant if you've never waited tables, okay? Okay? I'm just saying. And yes, that applies to every president, including current and previous. I'm just saying. That's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. These politicians were all war heroes. They were willing to put their money where their mouths is. You know what I'm saying? So they were willing to talk the talk. They were willing to walk the walk. That is the difference between then and now. That is the difference between the type of politicians, these lifelong, bring term limits, please. Lifelong politicians who just sit there smarmy as hell doing shady ass shit. Not saying that they weren't smarmy and shady back then, but at least they proved themselves worthy in some way. As a worthy male or female, they proved themselves worthy. They fought for their country. They stood up for their districts and their people.
Well into the era of politicians getting riled up and beating the shit out of each other. And Peter Francisco is going to be the guy in the room that's there to settle everything down. And for the next 6 years while Peter Francisco was a sergeant at arms, everybody was awkwardly fucking civil. Okay, he might be an old man, but he also might have one left in the tank and nobody wants to find out. In the 6 years that he was sergeant at arms, there was one occasion where the Speaker of the House had to order somebody to be removed, and that person was promptly picked up by the back of their neck and their belt line, carried out of the house and thrown out like it was the bartender from The Simpsons. He would continue to serve as the sergeant at arms until 1831, when at 71 years old, he would fall ill and eventually pass away from what doctors now believe to have been appendicitis. And that is the story of America's Hercules, the Virginia giant, Peter Francisco. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch, maybe drink some Echelon. Links for both of those over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out. I couldn't figure out how to work this into the video without breaking the whole flow, but in 1806, there was another story that Henry Clay came to visit Peter Francisco. Henry Clay is, known as the Great Negotiator. He's cousins to Cassius Marcellus Clay, the most gangster politician in history, like famous, important guy. And Peter Francisco supposedly told him this story about how, you know, people are always coming to fight him and he's always beating people up. Well, on one occasion in 1806, this one guy showed up and he wanted to fight Peter Francisco, and Peter just wasn't in the mood this day. He was getting tired of doing this all the time. So he just like, no, we're not fighting. We're not doing this. And the guy's like adamant, like, no, you're going to fight me. And Peter's like, no, I'm not. And I think that they called him Mr. Pamphlet in the story. And he's like, all right, well, let me feel your weight. And Peter's like, whatever, dude, fine. So the dude picks up Peter Francisco. He's like, holy shit, you're heavy. And Peter Francisco is just like over this whole situation. And he's like, you know what? Let me feel your weight. So the guy like raises his arms and lets Peter Francisco pick him up. And Peter like picks him up once, picks him up twice. And on the third time, he squats down, picks him up, and throws him over a 4-foot wall off of his property. That dude's still on the ground, like trying to gather himself. And Peter just goes, are we done here? And the guy's like, you might as well send my horse over next. So Peter pushes this horse up against the wall. It's only a 4-foot high wall. So allegedly, he was able to push the horse up enough and over enough to topple the horse over the wall after him. And the guy's just like, I'm satisfied. I'm fucking leaving.
That was a really good story. That was a really good one. I'm glad I had the time today to do this one. I'm actually past the time I usually upload in the morning. By the way, this is July 3rd, day before 4th of July. This is a Friday, and it is 7 o'clock in the morning now. Like I said, I got up, went to the gym, did my thing, took a shower, and then I started recording. I was, I'm off today. So it'd be really nice to not get up and go, like I do every single day, but I'm still here, still doing it. It was a really good story. It was really well done, really well put together. A lot of good facts, a lot of good information. He kept it fun. He kept it interesting, as he does. Like I said, you guys, please feel free to drop comments. I read every single one. I don't respond to all of them. And if you're being spicy in the comments, I might spice back. I might not. I don't know. We'll see. Doesn't bother me. It's the United States. You're free to say whatever the hell you want. If you're being a complete asshole, though, which nobody is, by the way, just for the record, nobody's being a complete asshole, but on other videos and stuff, they are. I don't care. Say what you need to say. All my love. I hope your day gets better. Okay. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody who's elaborating and giving me more information, educating me, correcting me even. I don't mind being corrected. Just be kind about it. Like, nothing I say is ever in disrespect. I'm never meaning it in a way to be negative towards the military in any way, shape, or form, or towards the content creator, to respect the shit out of him, or anything of that nature. I will be disrespectful to people who I think are disrespecting my country, my flag, my, the things that I believe in, the things that I love. So, or me, or my family. Me, disrespect me. I don't care. I got thick skin. I wouldn't do this if I didn't. Disrespect my kids or my cat, my cats, or my mom. Okay. That being said, super awkward, unprofessional, and lengthy because what's that? I heard like a big buzzing outside. Hey, by the way, I had a comment on my last video. I think it was the last one or last one of the last two videos. They said, you're making a long video longer. Are you new? Are you new? Let me know if you've made it to this point in the video and you are still here. First off, bless you. Second off, let me know in the comments. Do you expect the video to be longer when you have commentary accompanying it, or do you just want somebody to sit there and look at the screen and blink? Because to me, that's not fair use, and doesn't make sense. If you want to watch the video without anybody speaking or pausing it, you should go watch the original video. It's in the description. I put it there for a reason, y'all. I just thought that comment was so funny. I'm like, are you new? Anyway, shout out to you for your comment that made me laugh my ass off. Appreciate that. Anyway, take care of yourselves and each other. Remember that you are valid and you matter. Don't let anyone tell you different. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and get this uploaded, and it should post in about an hour. Okay? All right. I love y'all. Make sure you check out his content. Go buy his merch. Do all the things. Support. Let's go. I'm out. Oh, by the way, have an amazing 4th of July. Enjoy your family. Enjoy the weekend. Go shoot off some fireworks. I might go to the fireworks stand. I don't know. Maybe I will.